Thank you, Lauren. And while I'm bringing up Cameron's presentation, just as a reminder, we will have these presentations, the agenda, and the videos will be available at the DOH here site as well. So a lot of good information here, and we want to be sure you'll be able to find it. But now let's have Cameron, who'll be talk about Brightfields, and after that we'll have Dave Martin, who'll kind of talk about Brightfields also, but also something that kind of brings us back to a topic that was brought up earlier. So go ahead,
Thanks,
Cameron.
Ignacio. I'm still kind of tripping out at the picture of the grenade on the beach and couldn't imagine being down there with my family, stumbling across that from the CNMI presentation. So thinking about all you folks, what they're dealing with. Anyway, next slide, please. Just wanted to real briefly cover some of the laws that are transitioning Hawaii away from fossil fuel. We've got our GHG reduction law. We've got our energy efficiency portfolio standard requirement. And we've also got the highly touted renewable energy 100% by 2045 mandate. And I'd like to highlight that the electric utilities, Hawaiian Electric and KIUC, are the ones that are required to meet this mandate by law. The strike-throughs indicate that we've met that goal. Sorry, that I probably should have used the check marks instead. So those laws are still applicable. Next slide, please. Very brief. The Hawaii State Energy Office was officially statutorily created in 2019. So previously, we've been around for a long time, but we are a division of DBED, and we remain administratively attached to DBED, but we now have our own statutes and roles. Our Chief Energy Officer, Scott Glenn, who previously headed OEQC, some of you probably know who or a lot of you probably know who he is, so thanks to DOH for sharing. We have 4 areas of focus, starting with helping to prevent and mitigate disruptions to our electricity and fuel supplies. Douglas, we were activated for Douglas, like I know some of these other agencies were as well. The 4 areas are resiliency, energy resiliency, efficiency, renewable energy, and alternative transportation. Next, please, Ignacio. Given the theme of, well, brownfields releases in general, just wanted to highlight where we get the bulk of our fuel and electricity now. I think a lot of people know it's imported, and we rely significantly on imported oil and coal for our energy and fuel needs. And while our goal is to transition away from these fossil fuels, I do want to acknowledge and appreciate the critical role fossil fuels currently play in our lives here in Hawaii. So you can see kind of a diagram from the US Department of Energy. The crude comes into Oahu, there it's either refined or broken out into different types of fuels, and then it's shipped inter-island to the other islands. The next, I would say the need to regularly import and move liquid fuels between the islands poses a low probability but very high impact risk to our marine and coastal environments. Unfortunately, Hawaii hasn't experienced any catastrophic nearshore spills, at least to my knowledge. So hopefully we'll keep that up. Next slide, please. These are pictures. I think a lot of you are aware that the bulk of our oil comes through an offshore mooring point off Barbers Point. And then it's, you know, again, a lot of it goes to the refinery or to other fuel distribution services. Then it's also transported, like I said, via barge or tug to the other islands in different formats, whether it's diesel or gasoline or whatever is needed, jet fuel. Next slide, please, Ignacio. So the better news or the good news, what are we doing about getting rid of the fossil fuels? We are moving in the right direction. This graph shows the progress for each utility by island or county, looking at Maui, Lanai, and Molokai. And as you can see, each utility is getting more and more renewables on its grid. The green was Helco Big Island, which lost Puno the geothermal plant during the Kilauea eruption. They are trying to get that back online. But otherwise, you can see the other utilities going up slowly, or in the case of KIUCs, quite quite quickly. KIUC at times is able to run its grid at 100% renewable energy, which is quite an achievement. I'd also like to point out statewide, we're at 30% renewable energy, which includes H-Power, our largest single source of renewable energy according to our state law. Next slide. So yeah, we're at 30% right now. And how did we get to 30%? Well, half of that 30% approximately comes from rooftop or commercial solar installations. And that's the largest single source of renewable energy as a technology. Less than 0.5% comes from that, less than half. 16% of the 30% comes from about 60 utility scale renewable energy projects. And this is kind of why I called my presentation Brightfields Ahead, because we're going to need a lot more utility scale projects if we're going to reach 100% renewable energy by 2045, especially on Oahu, which, as we all know, has the most people, consumes the most amount of electricity by far. We do have a directory. I didn't provide a link here, but if you go to our website, you can learn more about all the existing and proposed renewable energy projects in Hawaii. Hawaiian Electric's got a great renewable status board, renewable project status board as well. If you want more information on these projects, please contact me. Next slide, please, Ignacio. I think a lot of us recognize why used or previously developed sites can be good for future developments, in particular renewable energy, and in particular to that, solar PV energy. The biggest advantage is that these sites have already been developed, so they're probably flat and cleared. They may be near existing infrastructure. It was interesting to hear the Bank of Hawaii speaker yesterday talk about the short shelf life that some of these environmental site assessments have, which is a lot shorter than I saw. So maybe the bullet point about previously permitted or studied is maybe a little bit overrated. Also, as some of the previous speakers have said, remediation may not actually be required to put a solar farm on a site. So next slide, please, Ignacio. Finally, the 10th slide of my presentation, I'm getting to the point and why you folks asked me to speak today. For those of you who I've lost already, you can click on the URL that's provided in the title and you can actually view this tool yourself on our website. The Hawaii Brightfields Initiative is a first cut due diligence tool for renewable energy, specifically solar PV project prospectors. It's a searchable database of previously developed or disturbed sites in Hawaii with information relevant to renewable energy development. And I'll show you what kind of information in a bit. The Brightfields database is a compilation of 5 existing databases that you can find, including the repowering mapping database, which is kind of the federal version of this that EPA puts out. That's a great tool. The Brightfields database that we have here is advisory only. For actual site status and information, you'd want to check directly with DOH. We saw the iHear presentation, which is very informative, and EPA as well. I'd also point out that a lot of the sites in our Brightfields database don't have a lot of information. So you get what you get, but it is a good first cut due diligence tool that you can sit in your office for free and prospect sites. It was launched in 2019. It was a partnership with the Energy Office, DOH here, Lynn, Iris, Melody, Kevin, and others at DOH. Thank you for all the time, Noemi, Ray at EPA. Where it came from was NREL offered a no cost to us assistance program called Solar Technical Assistance Program. So they did the bulk of the work, combining and compiling these different databases, which have different columns, and sometimes they'll have the same column with different information. Was quite a chore, and it took quite a while, but they did get it down to one database with just over 3,000 sites that you can go check out. And we'll look at one real quick. Ignacio, next slide, please. So I picked Diamond Head Crater. I don't expect anybody to develop any solar farms in there anytime soon, but they did have a wealth of information, so it serves as a good example project. As you can see, you can click on the map. It brings you to this. Next slide, please, Ignacio. This is the kind of data it has on the sites that have data. So this is kind of the first shot. It goes into a lot of the site identification information. It'll identify if it's been a part of any programs, either DOH or EPA or other remediation programs. I think FUDs too. Next slide, please. And then here's kind of what makes this a little bit unique is that it provides the information relevant to whether or not it might be a good site for solar energy development. You've got the solar potential, you've got whether there's a substation nearby, what's the status of that substation, what's the distance, is there a transmission line nearby, what's the distance to that. So that's kind of, I think, again, what makes this tool unique from other more formal and official databases like we saw with iHere. That wraps up the presentation on the Hawaii Brightfields Initiative. You can check out our website there, and I just want to thank everybody out there for listening. Thanks, Ignacio.